Happy Tuesday, everybody. This is Matt Tutay. Thanks for joining me for something a little different during a different time. I actually recall when I first heard about COVID-19 coming into our country, and I'm just the type of person who's way too laid back and probably way too relaxed because I do EFT, I think. But it's funny how like moms are always right. So I'm 33 years old and I still challenge my mom, and it's still she somehow is always right. So when COVID-19 first entered our country, I was like, relax, I'm looking up the statistics. We have less than 100 cases in the country and very minimal deaths, and that hasn't even hit in our county yet. So what's the big panic? And then, fast forward to now, and all of a sudden it's like it's become this contagion, this widespread thing that has put everyone out of their normal way of business and quarantined and isolated a lot of us. And I just think, oh my gosh, whenever is my mom going to be wrong? Can I ever be right over her? Nonetheless, thank you for joining me. I'm going to talk a little bit about energy focused therapy, also known as tapping. So something very different, but something, if you open your mind up to it, is very beneficial and will help you relax even during these unprecedented, unusual times. So let me get into the context of how EFT, or energy focused therapy, or tapping exercises commenced. And this was actually 50 plus years ago when EFT started coming into the business. And what was interesting is that it had the likings in the feel of eye movement desensitization, reprocessing therapy, and acupuncture kinds of therapies and massage therapies, very akin to all of those forms of therapy. However, it was just less decorated, less popular for whatever reason. But lately, what we've noticed is a trend in the other direction, because EFT has gained a lot of traction in terms of empirical evidence to support the theory. And I think we'll see it catching up to some of those more popular EMDR approaches within the next 5 years or so. So what is it? It's a movement and touch-based therapy, in addition to the mental aspect of therapy. And I think this works really well for some people, and here's why. So if you've been in the field long enough, even if you just have been around people who have been worrisome, concerned, anxious, you know that when people get very worked up, it's hard for them to sit still and practice something like mindfulness or meditation. If I tried to tell my mom that she needed to focus on her breathing, she would look at me like I'm crazy. And that's not just because I'm her son. It's because she is too on edge internally, right, to just sit there and do nothing or try to do nothing. So I like EFT because it enters into this realm of you can be more action oriented, more movement based with therapy, and it has that same productive benefit of helping your parasympathetic nervous system activate and your calm down physiological response taking over and kind of telling that sympathetic nervous system that it's okay, that you can calm down, that you can start to relax. So this would work very well, I think, for people who are just restless in nature and have anxious, avoidant types of personalities to begin with. I recognize that a lot of the folks that I've had encounters with who have these types of presentations aren't necessarily the best candidates for something like mindfulness or meditation practices. So this is where I think EFT finds its place in the therapy world. Now, how does it work, right? So EFT works with this concept of meridians, and what meridians are are there these precise spots on the body that are scientifically proved to send messages to that calm down response within our physiological makeup, right? So I will review a lot of the spots during the demonstration part of this video, but just know that the spots that I go over with you guys are only for convenience of you're seeing half of my body, but there are also spots on the entire body all the way down to the toes. So we're only going to be doing about 8 or 9 meridians that are activated through touch in the demonstration part of this video. But again, little asterisk, know that there are a host more of these meridians on the body that are scientifically proved to actually induce that relaxing effect within us. So how does this make sense? Well, I have a little bit of an airplane story. I have a big flying phobia. The problem with that is I love to travel. Consider that paradox, right? So here's me loving to travel. Most of the places that I want to travel to are far away, even outside of the country. So when I get on an airplane, I am nervous as all get out. And all of those rational types of thinking processes that any therapist is supposed to have down pat, that just goes right out the window, right? When your real fear is right there face to face. So for me, I can recall when I was returning from Colorado. It was the worst flight I have ever been on, the most turbulence I have ever experienced. And mind you, I do very awfully on flights that are completely like smooth. So this was not good for me. Anyway, what does not help is when you experience that turbulence and you're face to face with that phobic situation, whatever it is that's frightening or fearful to you, and you look around at people to gauge their reactions, right? And I'm noticing that people around me are panicking. This does not help my fear, right? So when I see a woman across the aisle praying as if it's her last prayer, that doesn't bode well for my relaxation, right? I'm not calmer after seeing that. But I actually looked to other people, right, during this flight, and I noticed that one person was particularly calm and reassuring, saying, "It's okay, everything's going to be all right." And it wasn't that that was so profound, and it was nothing I haven't heard before. But it was like the way she said it spoke to that fight, flight, freeze response within me. And it let me know that even though it was a very scary situation for me, I could begin to at least relax. Well, that little dose of relaxation that we get from people who are poised, are calm, are reassuring, even in the storms of life, right? It's like the eye of the storm. It's the calm that's within the storm that's going on around us. And when we see that calm, when we perceive that as genuinely, authentically, and truly calm, it almost sends a message to our internal makeup to say, they're calm, so now I can be calm. And the reason I share that story is because energy focused therapy speaks a similar message into our genetic makeup, into our genetic code, right? It has a similar effect. It's just done not by perception, but by sense. And that sense is predominantly the sense of touch, right? So just as we talked about the certain calculated spots on the body, also known as meridians, that send these signals right to the parasympathetic nervous system to calm down. These are the touch activations that truly speak to our calm down response within our genetic composition. So something that's very useful, very helpful to know, and especially if everyone else is panicking, it's something that you could definitely use to your advantage. So what does EFT work for? It's amazing how many things it works for. To my surprise, when I went to the conference at the University of Pittsburgh, I was shocked, just outright shocked to find out how many things EFT is efficacious for. Ready? Here comes the list. Depression, anxiety, traumatic stress response, and physical pain. Yeah, I said physical pain. I don't think there's any type of traditional therapy approach that we have available to us that is efficacious for physical pain, in addition to depression, anxiety, and traumatic stress responses. So this is a very unique type of therapy, which is why I'm a little bit surprised it hasn't become more popular, more decorated, more widely used and prevalent. But I think it just needs to catch up to some of these other popular EMDR types of therapies. And I believe that will happen within the next 5 years or so. So how effective is this, right? You're telling me that just by activating certain spots on the body through some touches and taps, that all of a sudden I won't feel depression, or I won't feel anxiety, or I won't feel the ill effects of trauma, or the discomfort from physical pain. And yeah, that's exactly what I'm telling you. And you're probably sitting on the other end thinking what I was thinking when I was hearing this for the first time, like, yeah, okay, buddy. Yeah, try to sell me on that. But I think the best way to actually buy into it is, number one, to have an open mind to it, because even though I was very skeptical before I bought into it, I did at least have an open mind, because I figure if it's something that helps our clients out, I'm willing to try anything to add to that therapeutic toolbox. So first, I think we got to have like the right mindset. Secondly, unlike most other therapies that aim to reduce, alleviate, mitigate symptoms, EFT actually strives to accomplish a true zero. That means on a scale of 0 to 10, 10 being the worst kind of symptom severity, you're experiencing 0 or no effects of depression, 0 or no effects of anxiety, 0 or no effects from trauma, 0 or no effects of physical chronic pain even. A little consideration for the physical pain side of things. What I've heard is that people who have chronic physical pain, once they do the tapping exercises for a period of time, what they start to notice is that that pain actually moves and shifts throughout the body until it actually leaves the body entirely. So a very unusual type of feeling and sensation based on what I've heard. And I've heard that from a number of folks. So if you're going to be participating in the demonstration part of the video towards the end, just know that if you do have physical pain, discomfort, that is a totally normal response and sensation to energy-focused therapy tapping exercises, and that is actually to be expected if you do have chronic physical pain. So don't be alarmed. That's totally normal. You'll be all right. It actually is part of the process that makes you feel better, physically speaking, too. So that's the true zero aim of energy-focused therapy, which is really unique in my opinion, really different, and distinguish itself as a very standalone type of therapy, maybe in line with EMDR, is something that truly obliterates a lot of these feelings, unpleasant, undesirable feelings. So how effective can it be? Well, I go back to, a lot of this. Let's do the comparison with the coronavirus, right? It's like there are a lot of screenings that are out there right now, and there are about a handful of questions. And if you look at those screenings and you answer those questions, if you're anything like me, you could likely get paranoid yourself, right? Have you been exposed to anyone who's been symptomatic? Well, during this time of year, a lot of people have allergies that resemble what's being presented for people who actually are testing positive for the coronavirus. And that can be a scare in of itself, right? So one of the things I think that's really compounding or complicating about this whole issue is that we can almost build the trail of fear back to an exposure, right? So I knew a coworker who was with a family member whose boyfriend was babysitting a dog whose significant other tested positive for COVID-19. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh shoot, now do I have COVID-19? Better start tapping, right? But that's kind of how I heard about the story that I'm about to tell you. It really sells the effectiveness of EFT, right? It was at a conference through a presenter who heard it from another practitioner who does EFT, who did it on a client, right? So this is very indirect, trailed knowledge in terms of how I was told the story about how effective EFT can be. But nonetheless, something to consider and something to open your mind to, because it's pretty remarkable what this story, how this story was described to me, I should say. So here's a lady, physical impairments, physical limitations, had a lot of difficulty with walking movements, right? Needed assistance when walking, and I believe she was using something like a walker. And when she was going to her energy focused therapist, or the presenter who was doing the energy focused therapy in front of an auditorium full of people, she actually needed assistance with ascending to the stage, the platform level, right? So usually a few steps to go up to the stage. And this woman who was volunteering to demonstrate EFT along with the EFT practitioner needed a lot of help to get there. So what was interesting that once the EFT practitioner slash presenter conducted several rounds of the energy focused therapy, was that this woman actually no longer needed assistance walking off stage. It's like, that doesn't even make sense, right? How can just doing this kind of stuff help me to walk off stage when I had trouble walking up on stage, right? So something that's almost like ludicrous, mind-boggling, it's like beyond belief or whatever. But if you just open your mind up to the possibility that it can have very powerful outcomes and results for people, that and you give it a try to sense it yourself, to feel it and experience it yourself, I think you'll really be surprised at how beneficial this kind of approach can be. Just to sell it maybe even a little bit more to you guys, I've used this on a number of clients, and I remember one instance where my client who came into my outpatient therapy office. This client usually was relatively calm, maintenance type of therapy, stable in their recovery. But one day I remember upon sight of her, her hands were trembling like uncontrollably, right? So I was like, is everything okay? What's going on? She's like, I don't know. I'm so worked up. I haven't felt like this in a long time. And I said, are you willing to try something different that might be able to help? And she said, yeah, anything to help. And that was my in there. So I used that as an opportunity to try some energy focused therapy. I didn't know if it would work. I was obviously willing to try anything that would help reduce her psychomotor agitation at that time. And I mean, it was to my surprise when I started doing it with her that after just a few rounds, maybe, of the energy focused therapy tapping exercises, I noticed her hands went from uncontrollable trembling to stability, which was remarkable to see, quite honestly. So she bought into it pretty quickly after she was able to experience the effects of it. And I have another case, a different client who actually had frequent hospitalizations because her psychotic symptoms were so life interfering, so debilitating, so severe and intense that even
Matt, are you still there?
and she started practicing it on her own, not only did it become like a preemptive kind of mechanism, meaning that it was something that that kind of prevented as many hospitalizations, as frequent hospitalizations. And if she did go to into the hospital, those hospitalizations would not be for an extended period of time, so they were much more acute. So this seemed to be something that really helped her and prevented her from going into the hospital, number one. But number two, helped her also physiologically get a grip on her symptoms of psychosis, which, I mean, I don't have any explanation for it, right? The science is there, but it's kind of like EMDR in that you have to have that little bit of trust and that little bit of leap of faith in order to just believe and hope for the fact that this could be very helpful to some. So those are a few stories that I shared to at least explain the power in EFT and the tapping. But I'm going to rewind back up to the supplemental aspect of positive affirmation. So because it's such an action-oriented, movement-based, touch response type of therapy, we do also use the supplement of positive affirmations. So when we do the tapping exercises, we usually like to say, even though we're going through an unusual time, and then here comes the positive affirmation part right after the comma, right? So even though we're going through an unusual time, comma, I have faith our country will rebound. I have faith we will make it through. I have faith we'll resume normal functioning soon. Those are the kinds of things that you say out loud that soothe your brain, that send those messages to your excuse me, to your neurobiology, that suggests that enhances and strengthens what you're doing with the tapping exercises, the physiological activators of that parasympathetic nervous system. So you're getting the um, the physiological aspect involved, but you're not leaving out the mental aspect because you're actually using those out loud, verbal, um, auditory, positive affirmations to supplement or enhance what you're already doing physiologically. So you'll hear me doing that in certain spots of the demonstration part of this video. Some people opt out of that, which is fine. I usually tell people to do whatever they're comfortable with because this is something that is an anxiety reducing or eliminating exercise. You don't want them to be doing something that's going to make them even more comfortable having done it. So they can technically opt out of the positive affirmation side of things, but know that it does seem to strengthen or enhance the effects of EFT once you incorporate that that use of positive affirmations and that positive self-talk that's going on in concert with what you're doing when you're activating the touch meridians. So let's talk a little bit about the spots and the magic number 7. So a little disclaimer before I actually do the demonstration, a lot of touching will be happening around the face area. And during this time, you know that is a big no-no. So I have my little hand sanitizer right here, and you'll see me using that immediately before doing the demonstration and immediately after. And I advise all of you to do the same, to just continue to keep up with our safe practices and protocols during this time. So a little bit about this magic number 7. The recommendation is that at a minimum, energy-focused therapists, participants should be activating at least 7 spots or 7 meridians on the body. The ones that I will choose will be as follows: the crown of the head, the eyebrows, the sides of the eyes, below the eyes, below the mouth, collarbone. There's a little crevice in between the pinky and ring finger that divots. That's a spot. And then finishing with the sides of the hands. So that would be one round. And in keeping with this idea of magic number 7, not only are there a minimum of 7 spots that we're activating through touch, but we're doing so a minimum of 7 times at each spot, 7 taps at each spot. Now, I'm not going to ask anyone to count because that almost increases anxiety and has a very counterproductive effect. So if you just follow along with me, and you go at your own pace, you'll be able to get those 7 taps, no doubt. If you just follow along, it's actually quite easy. So along with the 7 spots and the 7 taps at each spot, you have a minimum suggestion of 7 rounds of this. And yeah, that does take time. But what good things don't take time, right? So if it actually works for everything that it says it works for, I would have no problem doing something like EFT for 7 rounds, which probably takes, somewhere around 10 minutes maybe out of your day. If you want the shortcut version of this, that can be accomplished with partial benefit through a massage-like pressure that's applied to the inner fatty tissue of your palm that runs alongside your inner part of your thumb. So it's like an upward massage that's very pressured. You can probably see the color of my palm changing as I do it. And if you apply good enough pressure for an extended period of time, you should notice that you're starting to feel a little bit more relaxed, that you're starting to breathe a little bit easier as you do that. So something that's very transferable to many settings. A lot of people who are in Walmart who might be anxious and can't necessarily stop in the middle of the grocery store and say, oh, what did Matt tell me with EFT? Okay, he said, crown of the head and eyebrows and side. That's not going to happen, right? So something that's a lot more generalizable is the use of that inner fatty tissue on the thumb. If you're just able to apply pressure in an upward motion like so, that can have a partial EFT-like benefit just by doing that. A lot of people notice a lot of relaxation stimulated from just that kind of touch to that part of the body. Okay, but the abbreviated version is less effective. Know that too. So for the full version, we already discussed doing 7 rounds, 7 touch spots, and at least 7 taps at each spot. And like I said before, this is something that should be very felt, experienced firsthand. And again, remember to wash your hands before and after. So I think we're at the time where we can actually go through this together if you're ready and willing. I will bust out the personal hand sanitizer. So if you guys need to do anything like this, please do so. And if you'd like to get in your most comfortable position, usually recommended feet flat on the floor, good posture so that you're a little bit more upright wherever you're at. But you can do this from any position, really, even laying down on your couch if you'd like to. So now that we are all hand sanitized, hopefully, we'll go through the actual demonstration. Immediately before and after, to experience the true effect of it, I usually say to assess that and evaluate, you have to do at least a breath where you're assigning a percentage of that breath's accessibility, of your accessibility to that breath, I should say. So let me demonstrate what that's like, right? So a little nervous. I had a little bit of a hitch in my inhale if you really were astute in the video. So I give it about a 55% in terms of 0 to 100%, 100% being I fully am accessing my breath to its fullest potential. Maybe a little bit over halfway in terms of accessing that breath. So if you want to jot down whatever you think your percentage is pre-EFT, then do a deep breath immediately. Compare the two to see if you noticed any significant change or difference. That's usually one way to create buy-in to something like EFT. So I'm at 55. Let's see if we can increase that and improve that with some energy-focused therapy tapping. So for those of you who are ready and are willing to follow along, let's start with the crown of the head. Eyebrows. Sides of the eyes. Below the eyes. Below the mouth. Collarbone. In between pinky and ring fingers. Sides of the hands. back to the crown of the head, eyebrows, eyes open or eyes closed, whatever your preference is okay. Sides of the eyes, below the eyes. Pressure only has to be felt, so it can be as light or as hard as you'd like it to be. Collarbone, in between pinky and ring. Sides of the hands. Back to the crown of the head. Going to start incorporating some positive affirmations so you can hear how that supplements EFT. Eyebrows, sides of the eyes, below the eyes. Even though times are different, I have faith. Everything will be okay. Below the mouth. Even though times are unfamiliar, I have hope that we'll get back to normalcy. In between pinky and ring fingers. Sides of the hands. Back to the crown of the head. Eyebrows. Sides of the eyes. Below the eyes. Below the mouth. Collarbone. In between pinky and ring fingers. Sides of the hands. Back to the crown of the head. Eyebrows. Even though EFT is hard, I have an open mind to its effectiveness. How's that for a positive affirmation? Below the eyes, below the mouth, collarbone, in between pinky and ring, sides of the hands, back to the crown of the head, eyebrows, sides of the eyes, below the eyes, below the mouth, collarbone, in between pinky and ring, sides of the hands, down of the head, eyebrows, sides of the eyes, Even though I feel stress below the eyes, EFT can help me relax below the mouth, collarbone, in between pinky and ring fingers, sides of the hands, back to corner of the head, eyebrows, sides of the eyes, below the eyes, below the mouth, collarbone, in between pinky and ring, sides of the hands, top of the head, eyebrows, sides of the eyes, below the eyes, below the mouth. Even though EFT is weird, I'm starting to experience the positive effects. Collarbone, in between pinky and ring fingers, sides of the hands, crown of the head, eyebrows, sides of the eye, below the eyes, below the mouth, collarbone, in between pinky and ring, sides of the hand, and take that post deep breath. I felt a big difference. I'd probably give it about 80% that one. No hiccups along the way on the inhale, much deeper, more accessible, and on the exhale, much more slow and controlled, which is indicative of anxiety reducing effects. So something that really worked for me. Hopefully, it's something that you got to experience firsthand. And like I said initially, or alluded to initially, you would want to do this for a minimum of 7 times, but to experience more of the positive effects of EFT and tapping exercises, you do them until you feel completely and entirely and exactly the way you want to feel, feeling no effects of depression, no effects of anxiety, no effects of trauma, no physical pain. So if you still feel any inklings of those kinds of things, you would continue on with the energy focused therapy tapping exercises. So hopefully you guys found the demonstration useful. And if you if you didn't experience the effects firsthand, I would encourage you to not give up on it entirely yet. I remember doing it for a lot of people who had a tough time experiencing the effects initially, but after the second or third time trying, they were like, you know what, Matt, I actually got to experience the effects you were talking about. I thought you were out of your mind at first, but I now realize that if you just have a little bit more of an open mind, even if it doesn't work instantly on the first try and you're willing to try again, that it can benefit people if they don't give up on it on that first try if it's not as successful as you'd like it to be. So I think there's a spot here for questions, and I'm going to try to answer some of those questions at this time. Bear with me because this is my first time trying to do so on a webinar, so this should be interesting.
Hey, Matt, do you see questions?
Not on this screen, but that doesn't mean I couldn't see them.
If anybody has any questions, they want to submit them, go ahead now. Do you see Kathy White there?
How often do you do the tapping? Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so as far as myself, like I said, when I introduced this whole concept, I was the one who wasn't even, I was probably one of the last people to panic when COVID-19 set in our country. And that's just because my personality is much more relaxed, much more type B, I think, intrinsically than a lot of others. So I don't actually do tapping a whole lot because I don't experience a lot of anxiety, physical pain, traumatic stress response, or depression. But what I end up doing at anxiety-inducing events, like when I have to provide court testimony on a difficult court case, for instance, is I actually do the thumb massaging quite frequently when I have to do something anxiety-inducing, like providing court testimony or flying on an airplane, for example. So mine's very situation dependent and situation specific. And I don't do it as regularly as I probably should or could, but I do it prior to situations that cause me anxiety. Thanks, Colleen, for the compliment. Cynthia, do you have an outline you can share of what you covered today? I can get that to you. So I'll share that with maybe Julie and she can send it out to everyone. Is that okay, Julie?
That'll work, Matt. Yep.
Excellent. What are some of the other areas to tap that you did not discuss? So it runs all the way down through the legs, through the feet, through the toes. There is actually a visual depiction of this, probably accessible online if you just Google energy focused therapy Meridians and click on images. I'm sure it kind of lights up for you guys in terms of what spots are truly activated by the touch that are scientifically studied and based. So hopefully you can access that as soon as you Google them. If not, I can probably send something out to complement the written outline that I'll send Julie. And what are some, let's see. Michelle, is there a particular clientele that you would not suggest using tapping EFT for, in particular PTSD or abuse? I actually haven't found it counterproductive with anyone I've used it with. I will say that there are considerations in terms of who you use it with. So some people are have very adverse reactions to touch, even though it can be done by themselves. And by the way, as a side note, EFT actually is more effective if you have someone activate the touch spots for you. It's like, you know, when you try to massage yourself, how it's not always as effective as if someone else is doing the massage for you. The same is true for EFT. So there are considerations with physical touch for people who are survivors of trauma. Um, as far as trauma and abuse, I find it a really effective standalone skill. There's an advanced step or level to really use it as a trauma attacking mode of therapy or approach to therapy. So I would caution people to not use that as a standalone PTSD treatment, but rather a skill until you receive more advanced training that targets the PTSD more directly, because there are some nuances that I didn't demonstrate in the video. But like, even for instance, closing of the eyes is triggering to certain clients because they can think of they tend to think of certain things that are not necessarily good, and you know, they have adverse reactions to. So those are a couple considerations, but I honestly think it works really well as a standalone skill for every type of population. Were you tapping more than 7 times on each spot, Jennifer? I wasn't counting, but I guarantee you I was, because most of the time I do probably double that, just for my pacing. Lori, I'm a juvenile probation officer. Would you recommend doing this with kids? I work in a school setting. Absolutely do this with kids. If you go on YouTube and type in how to get rid of a sinus infection, how to prepare for a math test, how to deal with allergies, what you'll probably see is kids tapping like I just showed you. So it's very effective and useful for kiddos as well. Are there any books on EFT that you would recommend? I actually haven't read any that I've come across, as embarrassing as that might be to admit I do this, but I haven't read like a full book on it. So I'm going to have to get back to Cynthia on that question. And what can you do if you are in a meeting feeling anxious and cannot really do the tapping we did? Have anything that can be done that is not so obvious? The thumb massaging is one, but even a very transferable meridian that's pretty powerful in inducing relaxation is the meridian that's located in between your pinky and ring. So this right here is something that can accomplish a very similar effect. If you just do this is what I'm doing if you can't see it. And I have my hands on the desk, or you can put your hands on the lap and do that. I know for my girlfriend, for example, she has anxiety. And one of the things that helps her is when she's experiencing a little bit more anxiety, I just simply tap right on that spot right there. And it's not very obvious if you were to do it yourself. So that's my recommendation for that. And it said I was frozen, but I guess when I go to the question part, it freezes the video side of things so I can access the question. So that's why I was frozen.
Oh, hey, there's a couple other questions in the chat, Matt. When tapping beside the eyes, are you tapping the temples or just below that?
Not quite the temples. So that's literally, there's like an orbital bone or something. I don't know what it's called, but there's like an orbital bone that kind of rounds around the eye, and it's right on that bone. So that's about the location that you're looking at. So a little bit in from the temples, much more close to the eyes.
Okay, and are there actually hands-on trainings to learn this technique? Do you need to be certified to do this therapy?
You don't need to be certified to do this therapy. There are informal hands-on trainings that I've come across. I've seen some sent through some webinar type formats as well. I don't know if there's an actual certification for it, but because it can be used as a standalone useful skill, you can do that. You can kind of implement that skill with any population, just as if it were thought corrections, right? So something that can be very widely used.
Okay, and the last question I see here are the meridians the same as those used in acupuncture?
I don't know enough about acupuncture to confirm that, but I wouldn't doubt if there was some overlap.
Oh, and here Tina said, show us the other spot to do during a meeting. This was when you were frozen.
Oh yeah, sorry, Tina. So it's right here. It's in between the pinky and the ring finger. It's that little crevice, that divots right there. Very good in inducing relaxation, very powerfully actually. And it can look like this during a meeting, right? So something that can be almost a normal way of fidgeting, I guess. And if you want to put that on your lap, you can do so underneath. But all I'm doing is doing a slight, slow tap to that crevice, that divots in between my ring finger and pinky finger.
Awesome. And I think that's it, Matt.
All right. Well,
that was great, Matt. Thank you. I feel very relaxed.
You're welcome. I felt relaxed too. Did you see it in the video evidence that my breath was actually a lot better afterwards?
Yeah, mine was too. I did that and I was like, wow.
Yeah, it works. It works.
Good deal.
Yeah, so thank you again for doing the presentation. And as a reminder, it was recorded and we'll be posting, Sarah will be putting it on our website, www.wedacinc.org. And Matt is using, is that SPHS hand sanitizer or?
SPHS patented hand sanitizer. So make sure you guys do the same.
Yeah. Well, thanks again, Matt.
Thank
All right,
you.
guys.
Everyone stay safe. Thank you again.
Yep.